The traditional approach puts you into a classroom and teaches you grammar rules and vocabulary and reading and writing, but we already know that doesn't quite work. So what we recommend is you first start with the basics, and you want to clear the noise. When you first enter into the language, there's a new set of sounds, a whole new acoustic system. So you literally don't hear it. The question then is, how do we do that? And the way you do that is you break down the signal into its component pieces. You filter out one element at a time, one detail at a time, and then you focus on it. You focus your attention on it and repeat it over and over again until it imprints into your subconscious mind, until it imprints into your motor memory. And once you've achieved that, then things start to become more clear, right? The noise and static starts to fade away and you're tuned in. First, you maximize your motivation by understanding what it is your personal most meaningful goal is, like who it is you're trying to connect with, and what it looks like. Or first off, let me share my screen again. One way you can think about it is, you know, when this happens and your connection with the person is blocked because some annoying beavers put up a bunch of, you know, wood sticks there and you can't actually let that thing flow. The 3 P's of learning are perception, practice, and performance. Yeah, we talked about that for the movement lecture, right? So I mentioned in jiu-jitsu, for example, I perceive the better jiu-jitsu person doing a movement, then I practice that movement myself. I play around with it, try to get different angles, see how it feels. Then when I come into the match, I perform it. And then once I successfully perform it, I've integrated it into myself. And then what happens is when you integrate, you've now expanded. You've become more a better jiu-jitsu person, a better whatever the art form is, which means when you go back and you perceive the experience again, someone doing the thing, you end up perceiving more details because now you have that much more expert of an eye, expert of a perception mechanism. So you keep repeating that loop. And this is the learning loop. This is how learning occurs. So language learning, when you're in the reading and writing paradigm, right? And you kind of memorize these words on paper and then, you know, you kind of sticks in your head and it's kind of more like, it's like memorizing the 50 states and their capitals. It's more declarative memory. It's more just pure like kind of intellectual mind, but it's not a movement practice. When you develop the ability to just go in with the flow of the language and not crash and not drown and like kind of flow with it, what you become is a mimic. This is why I call it the mimic method. And what a mimic can do, this is the first thing that I try to achieve when I'm learning a foreign language, is become a mimic. What that means is that when someone speaks to me in the language, even though I don't know what any of it means yet, I'm able to extract out a sentence, a phrase, a couple of syllables, and then I can perceive it accurately, all the sounds, all the intonation. So someone says something, and then I can perceive it, and then I can mimic it. How do we do that then? Now that we've kind of established our goal here, enter into flow state, enter into the flow of the language, feel the flow of the language and have it communicate freely. How do we do that? Well, the signal is the flow, right? This is the flow we're tapping into. And we've already filtered out all the different details and elements of that flow. So imagine then you've already done this process. You've retrained your brain to listen for syllables rather than words. That's the big one. Then you've trained your ear to hear stress patterns as denoted by length, loudness, and pitch. You've trained your ear to follow and trace the melodic cadence of phrases. And you've also trained all the consonants, all the vowels of this language. So now you can pronounce them, you can hear them and distinguish them from each other. You can also do them in combinations. So those, like, you know, yesterday we were speaking with Trina, and, you know, being able to make that R sound in combination with the T sound. You've done all those things. And it seems like a lot of work, but if you just stick with it systematically, and that's what we provide you in our courses, you know, kind of a roadmap for that, then if you just stick with it, you'll be very impressed by how quickly you can start to integrate all of these things. But we've only studied them all in isolation. How do we now combine all of it? No one speaks just in melody or speaks just in, you know, stress patterns. We have to combine all of it and we need to do it at full speed. So when I made the first Mimic Method program, it was called the Flow of Spanish. And the way I kind of presented it to people was I say, listen, you can learn vocabulary with all these things over here. You can learn grammar with all these things over here. What you're not getting is the flow. And it's not the same as the pronunciation. It's not the same as accent. You can learn how to pronounce words individually pretty well, but the flow of the conversation, that's something else. And I decided that the best way to do that, in my experience, was to learn songs. So, okay, if I get these Spanish songs, and then I break them down syllable by syllable, and then I learn them bit by bit in slow motion, and then gradually speed it up, then what I'll have is I'll have a repertoire of songs. We break down the signal, and the build up for the signal is first you practice rhythm, that's chopping things into syllables, and then getting the stress pattern of the syllables, and then you have melody, seeing how the syllables move up and down in pitch and kind of flow into that cadence there. There's a famous interview with Bruce Lee, and we'll see what he says.
This is what it is, okay? I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
Flow state, that what Bruce Lee's talking about when you're like water, you're entering flow state. This book on the right, Stealing Fire, is the more recent book. I'm actually doing training with these people right now. They're kind of the lead experts on flow state. So what is flow state? Well, these Stealing Fire guys define it. The best way you can think about it is with this acronym, STER, S-T-E-R. And it's that experience you have, it's not, happiness, it's not, any other kind of emotions. It's that experience, that state of consciousness you enter into where you lose your sense of self, you lose a sense of time. Time flies by without you realizing it. Things seem effortless. It just kind of flows and goes. And then the experience is very rich. You have, you notice all these details. It's a higher intensity kind of experience. So what are some examples? Well, one is a flowing conversation. This is the one we're really trying to focus on here, the Mimic Method. When imagine think about the time you met that person, you just had that really special chemistry or whatever, and then time goes by. You can just speak. You feel like you're understood. You feel like you understand that person. You can just talk forever, right? That's a flowing conversation. Or maybe in a sport, maybe you love basketball or soccer or surfing is a really good one as well, where you just become one with the elements. You become one in the game. You're not thinking about, what work do I have to do tomorrow? Or like, what was that person talking about earlier? Like, boom, you're completely immersed in the moment. Notice again that word immersed. I keep going back to these water metaphors. You're completely immersed in the moment and engaged. So when you're in this flow state, all the things that typically get in the way of what you want to do are gone. Your sense of self-consciousness, your sense of worrying about how much time it is, putting in effort and laboring things, and then you're really entering this rich flow state. I want you to really focus on this metaphor here of water, flowing water, because it really is the most effective metaphor to understand what we're talking about here. So we already spoke about, we want to have a flowing conversation. Once again, think about the person you're most comfortable with, you don't think about anything, it just kind of naturally goes. And then compare that to when you're trying to speak this foreign language and you're super nervous, you can't get the words out, you have no idea what's going on. So when we get emails from people and we hear that the most common frustration that language learners have, they fall into these two categories. One is, I can't follow along when native speakers are speaking because they're speaking too fast. The words blend together. Maybe I know a bunch of words on paper. Maybe I've learned how to read and write. But in a conversation context, I feel like I'm drowning, right? So that's what happens when water turns against us, right? We have this stream of sound coming at us at high speed. And if we don't know how to manage it, we can kind of get lost in that flow and drown in it. Or when it's time for us to speak, we feel blocked, right? It's as if there's, trash in the river or a dam in the river. So you want things to flow out of us. We have things we want to express, emotions, thoughts, feelings we want to put out there and express our true identity to people, but we can't because we feel blocked, right? I can't get the words out. I get tongue-tied. I feel stuck. If your language is not on offer, you can just search phonology. So I can put in like Lithuanian phonology and then get the Wikipedia article, which will always be first. And then this breaks down the consonant sounds. And it might be a bit intimidating at first, but if you just kind of stay with it, this is representing all the different parts of the mouth we talked about, or this is actually labial, dental, alveolar, palatal, velar. It's telling you what part of the mouth you're making the blockage and then what type of airflow it is. So this is the stuff you learn in our course. We break it down for you in a much more user-friendly way. And then the vowel sounds as well. So this represents all the different sounds a person might use in Lithuanian. So once you learn how to, you can 80-20 slim things down and be like, okay, I already know how to make the M sound. I already know how to make the B sound. Maybe I don't know how to make this velar fricative sound, right? So you learn how it's actually made. You can click on it and, voice velar fricative. If you get our Spanish sheet, this sound exists in Spanish, for example, and you can learn how that works. Anyways, you learn the elemental sound, how to pronounce it in isolation. Then you try to transcribe things.